Hello and welcome to the Academy of Powerful Caregivers, presented by Kevin Shorter. This is Module 1, the motivation of a caregiver. Today's lesson is how to trust in the goodness of man. Welcome back to the Academy of Powerful Caregivers. I'm Kevin Shorter. I hope you're enjoying what you're hearing so far on the lessons. We're just getting started. This is going to continue to build, and we're just going to continue to release hope within you because you are powerful as a caregiver. And as you become powerful, and as you realize your strength in you, you're going to release hope and life into others. So last lesson we looked at the goodness of God, and that's really, without the goodness of God, there is no hope. And so we looked at the necessity of that goodness, but also how it is really God's glory being represented as we focus and hold on to the goodness of God. But just as we need to hold on to the goodness of God, we need to hold on to the goodness of man, and that's what we'll look at today, the goodness of man. Each of you feels like that there's a call to work with other people, to give and to give out of yourself to others in need. And all of you got there for a different reason. It could have been you just have a natural heart to serve other people. It may be that because of your experience growing up and taking care of sick loved ones, maybe a family member, maybe it's just a close friend that was nearby, that you have grabbed a desire to help others, and maybe even become a little bit of your identity. This is what you do. And maybe it's just like you have experienced such pain in your life that you want to do your best to help other people to get out of the pain. Whatever it is, maybe you just don't even know. Maybe that's just what you do. But whatever it is really important to know, kind of to think through what that is. Because there's going to be times when you're going to be wanting to give up, wanting to throw in the chips and say, okay, this is just not worth it anymore. And so being confident in that really helps draw from that experience. So as you know where your source of your service is coming from, then you're able to continue to give out when it becomes harder. There's a story in the Bible. Jesus is kind of later on in his ministry. The disciples have been following for quite some time, and they start going through the city of Samaria. And at the city, they are not received, and so they're not actually one of the few places that did not welcome Jesus and his ministry and the work that he was doing. And Peter and John come up to Jesus and go, hey, should we call down fire? Should we destroy this city because they rejected you? And it's just interesting because they had been with Jesus for 3 years. They've done miracles with him. They saw him connecting with crowds, and they saw him doing all these things of ministering out of love and the goodness of God towards people. And yet, at this time of rejection, at least Peter and John are so turned off by it that they want to destroy that city, and actually thinking that that's what Jesus would have wanted. As you can see, they didn't really have that calling down very well. And so it's really easy. There was a time early on, my wife and I, we were helping a group of college students. We took them on this trip, and it was just us and a small group of college students, and it was just a wonderful time. It was just really intimate and close. They were calling us mom and dad, and it's like we loved them, and we truly loved them. And we were doing things that, at least for us at the time, was just we were seeing God work, and it was wonderful. We came back with wonderful experiences. But there was one, as we came back, probably just 2 to 3 weeks after we got back from this trip, she started making false accusations against us. And some of the other staff on our team started believing it, and it became just hard for a while. We got into a lot of discussions about like what's going on, and it really came out to be nothing. A couple weeks of just kind of intense talks for no reason, and it turned out that the following year that the student some bad things happened to her. She made some poor choices with the relations to some other, like a boyfriend and different things. And it was almost like, oh, we've been vindicated. See, this person who created such hardship for us is now going through something bad in herself, and that, at least that's what we could have felt. And but it's not. It's not. Our heart is never to see anyone suffer and to have bad things happen to them. And if and that's really the testing of what are you going to, like, why you're a caregiver. And if you're going to be focused on I'll give care to this person but not this person, what will happen if the one that you do love and want to care for, their attitude changes, and then they do some things that make you not want to help them anymore. So that's really the challenge about the goodness of man is, are we going to love those that deserve to be loved, or are we going to love those that are going to be hard to love? We're going to love those or serve those that it's going to be difficult. They're not going to receive us. We're going to turn away from us and all this stuff. That's really going to be the challenge, because it's those that we care for and we serve that are a struggle and hard. That's really where we're going to find lasting impact. I mean, Jesus said anyone can love those who love you back, or those your friends. But this is what true love is: those who lay down their lives for their enemies. That's not what he said, is it? Lay down their life for his friends. But here's the thing: while we were still enemies, he laid down his life for us. So I did misquote that, but the lasting effect of Jesus' love was the fact he laid down his life for his enemies. Because the thing is, not everyone's going to receive you. It's just not the case. It's just like some people are just going to think that you're kind of a flake, or think that they're just not going to receive you well. And you need to have a confidence within yourself that what you're doing is out of the right reasons, so that when accusations come up, you can just kind of hold on to the goodness of God, but also hold on to your calling. But there is that goodness in man. So we will see things in people that are really bad. We talked a little bit about last week about the things that other people have done to the people we're helping, but sometimes it's the people that we're helping themselves that have done something to themselves or to other people. You might have a calling to serve those in prison. And, well, a lot of them are there because they chose to do something. Now, that doesn't mean they're not deserving love anymore. I'm just saying that it's coming from a different angle. Or you might be in the nursing profession, and maybe you're helping someone with lung cancer, but they got that way because of smoking. So they made poor choices. Or they have skin cancer because they spent a lot of times out in the sun, not because they were doing hard work, but because they just like to get a deep tan. So there's things that people can choose to do that are, and of course that's not really that evil, but the thing is, are we going to want the consequences of their choices to be impacted them? Or are we going to love them in the midst of it and actually say, no, Christ died for those consequences even, and they don't actually have to go through that. There's grace and there's mercy that could be available to them if we were willing to come in and love them. And so that's what we want to do is, and we have to believe in the goodness in them as well. When God originally made us, He didn't make us, evil, and then Jesus came and made us good. Jesus didn't come, die on the cross to put goodness in us. He actually died on the cross to remove the evil that came with sin, so that the goodness that God originally placed in our lives can have a place to flourish. And so Jesus said that let your light shine before man, that they will see your good deeds and glorify God in heaven. And Isaiah talks about that we will rise and shine and allow God's glory to come. And so we have this idea of shining forth and allowing the goodness in us come out. And of course, a lot of that's for Christians. God says He took our heart of stone and gave us a heart of flesh. So we do have a heart that's desiring God, especially for those who are Christian. But even those that are not Christians, they might have still a sin nature that's kind of keeping them as enemies to God, but deep down within them, they were created good. When God finished making Adam and Eve, he looked at everything and he said that it's very good. And then later sin happened. Sin did not take away the goodness. It covered it up so the goodness could not be seen. And for us as caregivers, and we're looking at other people and the evil of this world, we're going to have to look at them and say, no, there's still goodness in them. And I'm going to call that out. That is my goal. That's my desire. I'm going to call out the goodness in them. So we actually are supposed to connect to that goodness, because that goodness, as we talked about even last time, is that the God's glory was His goodness. So as we look at the goodness that's placed in us, that's actually a piece of God's glory. And even in non-believers and anyone, they have a goodness that's placed in them that as we call it forth, we're actually calling forth a part of God's glory to be manifested in their life. And so we actually get a chance to connect with more of God's glory. So there is even a little bit of a, if you want to look at it this way, a selfish desire in calling out the goodness of other people, because we get to experience a little bit more of God's goodness by doing that. And so it is there, and that's our goal, is to look into that. We will actually get into a whole lesson later on about how to partner with God in order to find the goodness. But right now, we're just really focusing on the fact that the goodness is there, and really believe that it's there. Because if we give up on that belief, then we will give up on certain people altogether. And as long as we are still here on earth and the Holy Spirit is still manifested in the lives of other people, there is still hope for everyone. Now there's still, we might not trust everyone because they're not connected to the goodness they placed in them, but that is still there. And as we call it forth, the person that God created wants to live out of that goodness. Now they may make choices to make that hard, but our goal as caregivers and powerful caregivers is to really speak to that place of goodness. So people start believing in themselves as other people believe in them. And as they start seeing, okay, you're saying this, it's feeling true, and I feel it coming up in me, that goodness is real. And so I start to believe it, but it helps when other people call it out. Because what happens is, a lot of us, we can actually believe there's goodness in other people before we believe it in ourselves. And a lot of that's because we actually know what's going on in here in our minds. And it's like, well, if you really knew what was going on here, you won't say that I'm good. But God's saying, no, you are good. And the stuff in here is some of those lies that have been placed there by sin or through the enemy that you still need to fight through in order to make better choices about what you believe. And so when it says in Corinthians to take every thought captive, it's not just your own thoughts. You're going to take the thoughts of the other people as well. And say, no, when you say you're stupid, that is not true. God did not make stupid people. God made you smart and intelligent, and you have within you the ability to understand and comprehend the things that God's placed in your life. And He's even allowed us to connect with the wisdom of the Holy Spirit, which is infinite wisdom. And so we have ability to actually understand all things because of God in us. And especially we should see as Christians, because we have the mind of Christ, and even greater likelihood of that. But even non-believers have it because the goodness that was placed in them from the beginning. And some of them actually, because of their lack of connection with religion, can actually tap into a little bit quicker, because religion a lot of times says that we're sinful and we're going to battle through this life until we actually get to heaven, when things finally get better. And so we actually put limitations on ourselves that God actually didn't want to put there. He says, I've given you life and life abundantly. That's why I came. And that life is even now. So that connection is available now. And so for us, as we connect to other people, we want to connect to the goodness there. We want to connect to what God has said. And not so much focusing on what they're not showing it right now, or what the evil that is still there. We want to say, okay, that's We can deal with that, we can talk about and address it, but that's not our focus. Our focus is on that goodness and how we're going to release that goodness. We think about Zacchaeus. When Jesus went to go see Zacchaeus, and so we know a little bit about the story. He's a tax collector in a city. Everyone seems to hate him. He's short, and nobody will let him come in close to see Jesus, so he has to climb the sycamore tree in order to get up high, and so he can look down and see Jesus coming his way. Now, Jesus looks up and sees Zacchaeus. He doesn't see, oh, there's that rotten criminal, scoundrel, liar, cheater who's making all these problems in the city. He looked up and saw Zacchaeus, and he goes, that is a child of God, and that's who I want to go spend time with. And when I say child of God, he was a Jewish man. He was part of the descendants of Abraham, and so he's like, I want to connect with this because he's one of our own. But anyway, he looked at Zacchaeus and was like, I want to reach out to this guy, and so I am going to dine with you. Everyone else hated this. Is like, doesn't he know that he's a sinner? All these issues he has. Why does Jesus want to spend time with Zacchaeus? But Jesus is like, no, there's good in there, and I am going to find that goodness. And as you look at the story, you never see Jesus even mentioning the fact that, hey, Zacchaeus, you stole some money. You've been cheating people. I want you to stop. He never even, like, you see, like, maybe at the dinner going, oh, look at that goblet. How many people do you have to rob to get that? He didn't do any of that kind of stuff. He just loved Zacchaeus, went to his house, allowed Zacchaeus to serve him, to feed him, and in the midst of this attention and being honored by Jesus, Zacchaeus immediately turns back to God. He says, you know what? I have sinned, and I've stolen, and I want to return back half of what I have, 4 times those I've cheated. And Jesus sees that response to the Holy Spirit working in his life, of that response of responding to Jesus, giving him honor and addressing his goodness. And then he's like, you know what? Salvation has come to this house. And there was no gospel presentation. There was no telling him he was a sinner in need of Jesus. He just so focused in on, you are a person, a child of Abraham, and you are valued to me. And so once he saw Jesus valuing him, he started seeing value in himself. And once he saw value in himself, he's like, you know what? I haven't been living up to the standards of that value that's been placed in me. And I'm going to make a change. And I'm going to actually live towards God right now. And so he made a change to that. And so that's how, as we connect with other people, is that we're connecting to the goodness placed in them as well. And that's really life-giving. Man, it's really draining to always focus on people's sin and negativity and all the hardships that's going on. We want to focus on what's good in there and draw that out, because that makes them happy and makes them want to change. And we're not always trying to have to change them. I tell you, it's a lot easier helping other people that want to help themselves. And if we focus in on their goodness that God's placed there and call that alive, and they make the changes themselves, that just takes it a lot easier on our end. And I know some of you are going to be working with people who have an illness, maybe like physical therapy, which you might think is, okay, well, that's not really an issue about goodness or evil, but it will, in the sense of how you respond to them. Man, there are people who have given up on physical therapy because they don't see any need to get better. They've kind of given up hope, and they've given up life. And as you, as the caregiver, you're not just getting them to walk again or getting them to being able to move a limb or muscle. You're actually instilling hope that their life can be better. And so you need to call out the goodness in them that God has placed in there, and allow, your life is not over yet. You still have breath to breathe, and you still have life to give. And so we want to call out the goodness within them. So it might not work so quick as it did with Zacchaeus, but it's still a call for us to do. And as we look at even Romans 3:23 is a common verse used for the gospel because it talks about all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And so we focus on that all have sinned. And it is true, all have sinned, and all of us need a Savior. And when I'm trying to get away from that, but what we focus on is that sinning part, is that separation, that the way we translate, kind of describe the gospel back in the day, it was like here's a target, and sin is anywhere if you miss the bullseye, that's sin. That's like falling short of the glory of God being the target, and you fall short, that's sin. And so you are removed from that. But the idea really of that, it's not really like it's different, but one idea we don't talk about so much about that verse is that we've fallen short of the glory of God. And if that we've fallen short, that means we were all intended to be within the glory of God. We were intended to live out the glory of God. We are intended to carry the glory of God within us because God's placed His glory in us, and that is the goodness of Himself that He's placed within us. We're called to carry it in such a way that it manifests in our lives, and other people see that goodness coming out and say, God is on that person, God has blessed them, God is real, and I want more of God. And so let's call out the goodness in people. And yes, Jesus is help. Don't misunderstand. Jesus is still a huge part of this because He allows us. It's like Jesus came and He died for us to bring us back to God. He removed the burden. So we don't have to spend all of our time focusing on sin anymore because He removed the wages of sin. He removed the penalty of sin. He removed that the idea that sin has separated us from God, and He has removed us. Now we can come boldly before the throne. We can come boldly before God to draw near to God. All of Hebrews, draw near to God, draw near to God. And so and even in James, draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. And so there's that calling to be in God's presence, and it's calling for God to release more of Himself within us. We are to be imitators of Christ, and it's supposed to be alive within. God's supposed to be alive within us. So, our call to just even think of our call to love others. We are to love others as we love ourselves. So it's like we've got love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so if you don't love yourself, if you don't believe there's goodness in you, you're going to have a hard time believing the goodness is in another person. Or if you try to put yourself down, you're going to limit the ability of the other person to receive the love you have. So you want to realize, hey, there's goodness and greatness in me, but as you experience it more and more and more of His love and realizing how much He's put in you, you start realizing He's put so much in everyone else. And as we start connecting with how He's put His love and His goodness in other people, we start actually connecting more with God. And really, we talked about the second is something like the first. So in Matthew 22:37 through 40, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law and the prophets hang on these two commands." So if we look at what we're supposed to do as Christians, two things: love God and love others. But one thing is that the second is like unto the first, and the idea is that if we want to love God, we have to love others. And in some ways, even as we love others, we're actually growing in our ability to love God. Because if we realize that God has placed Himself in other people, even in non-Christians, and I really want to hit this, it's not just when you become Christian and invite Jesus in your life, does that when God puts goodness in you. Now sin is removed and the goodness He's placed in you has freedom to overflow. And so it's definitely worth it. And obviously the connection with heaven. And I want you to hear that there's that you're better off having Jesus. But I'm just saying, you shouldn't limit your love to people, because whether or not they have accepted Jesus, there's still goodness in them, and actually we want them to see the goodness in them so that they're drawn to the relationship with God and invite Jesus in, because we don't want them to come to Jesus to become a Christian so we can say, hey, I'm a good Christian. We want them to come to Jesus so that goodness we see in them starts fully being realized, and so that God's glory is shining even more on this earth, because it's got another representation of it going out in its fullness. Because the glory that God's put on me is not like the glory He's put on you, and the glory He's put on you is not like He's put on the other person next to you, or the other person that you're friends with, or your parents, or your children. Your glory is a little bit different. It's going to start shining as you connect with Jesus and with God and allow His glory to be released in you. You're actually getting a fuller version of who He is. And so it's weird. It's like you start thinking about like all these people living and having these connections with God and connections with other people, and they're seeing these great revelations of understanding of who God is, and it's really because they have a different aspect of God's love, and it all kind of together, as the body of Christ all comes together, we start seeing a more complete version of that love, and it starts to see that, wow, God is so immense. And when we start thinking about how wide and deep and long the love of Christ is, it's amazing. We can never fully dive into that. Even when we get to heaven, we got years of exploring of what that love is going to be like. But as we get to love other people, we're actually unearthing more of His character and more of His love. And we start seeing some of the trials that they've gone through and how God continues to love them in the midst of that. And we become overwhelmed by His goodness. And some of the things about work and serving other people, as you're connecting with God, you can actually be overwhelmed by His love for them. And that's just one of the greatest blessings you can have. And so, but we have to believe in the goodness that God's put in there. That God didn't come to save people because, man, they're so screwed up. I maybe can make something out of him. No, He loved you so much that He sent His Son to die, because it's like there's someone there. I desire to connect with that love they have, because they ignite my heart unlike anyone else. And so as we're reaching out to other people, we're reaching out to the goodness place, because they're going to release a part of God that not only allows us to see more of Him, but allows Him to find greater joy. And I don't even know how that's even possible. But that's one of the reasons why all the angels rejoice when one of them come to know the Lord, is because it's releasing more of God's glory, and someone realizing how wonderful they were created, and being able to connect with God and love Him in that way. And as people who love God, we are happy when God's happy. And He loves people. He really loves people. And so let us do our best to connect with that for everyone. So much of the Bible, there's so many one another's, like love one another, encourage one another, bear with one another's burden, all these different things. And so when we actually connect with other people, we're actually learning how to connect with God for ourselves. So when it says that can we comfort other people, we comfort other people with the comfort that God's given us, but we start realizing how much comfort He's given us as we comfort other people. Because we start realizing, there's hope that God's placed in me, and I'm releasing life in you. And do we believe? Let's say we believe that we are accepted when we've sinned, that we feel like we're forgiven. If we can't go to someone else and confess our sins, then do we really feel forgiven? We feel like that God's getting ready to punish us because of the mistakes we've made, and it's really a test of how deep His forgiveness has gone in us, and how much we realize His forgiveness. Because His forgiveness is complete, but do we really realize it? And do we believe in God's protection, or do we refuse to forgive others because we feel like they're going to hurt us again, or I need to keep myself at a distance? And it doesn't mean that you have to allow yourself to be hurt again, but you do have to allow yourself to release the forgiveness. to release that anger, that unforgiveness, so that you can receive all of what God has for you. And so part of the loving one another is putting yourself in places where you may get hurt, but you're trusting in God's protection and trusting that this is what God's called you to do. And it's really releasing you into all that God has for you. If we believe in the goodness of man, are we going to put ourselves in a place where we get hurt? Sometimes. Will people think we're foolish? Yeah. Will people take advantage of us? Maybe. But are we going to trust God that this is the better way of living? Are we going to trust that this is the way that's going to bring life and to really connect us with the love of God, which is really, when we start realizing how lovely He is, we want to connect with Him as much as we have. In all reality, we're not serving other people anyhow. We're serving the Lord. Colossians 3:23 and 2:24. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. The fact is, if you do what is good, you will be blessed. God rewards those who live out in faith, who seek Him, who draw near to Him. And part of drawing near to Him is loving other people, because there is the goodness and there's the glory of God is in them that they're falling short of living out. So we want to connect with that, so we may be able to get connected more with God and to love Him more. So just call it out on other people. Look and encourage one another as long as is today. We want to see more of God's love released. And the hope really in serving others and caring for others is there's goodness in them, and we are releasing it and releasing life everywhere we go. And so let's do that. Let's release life. As we end, take a couple minutes and think through just two things that God may be speaking to you today, and write them down. And I'd love for you to share them with me, with others. It's a joy serving you in this way. And let's just all just continue to go forth, because we are powerful people, and we're powerful caregivers, and we have life that we're giving out to others. We hope you enjoyed this lesson from Kevin Shorter on the Academy of Professional Caregivers. If you have any questions or comments, please send them to apc@josiahscovenant.com. Be sure to check out the next lesson on how to have empathy without losing hope.